This is our PN junction diode forward characteristic measurement and reverse characteristic measurement. This circuit is forward characteristic measurement. This is our PN junction diode. This is silver ring. This side is negative terminal and this terminal is positive terminal. And this is resistor, 10 kilo ohm resistor. First, diode positive terminal connected through the power supply positive terminal and negative terminal connected with resistance, and resistance other ends connected to the ammeter positive terminal, and ammeter negative terminal is connected the power supply negative terminal. This is our voltmeter and this is our ammeter, and this is the power supply. Voltmeter is connected parallel in this diode. Voltmeter connected in parallel. This is our voltmeter, and ammeter connected with series. This is our ammeter. Now varying the voltage and corresponding reading, note down here. First reading is serial number 1. First reading is input voltage 0, input voltage showing here, VD showing here and ID showing here. Varying the input voltage. First reading number 1, input voltage 0, then all is 0. Second, varying the voltage 1.5 volt. Varying the input voltage, serial number 2, input voltage is 0.5 volt. Corresponding the value VDF is equal to 0.406 volt and ID is equal to 0.04 milliampere, and varying the voltage 1 volt, serial number 3, varying the voltage 1 volt, and corresponding reading VD is 0.457 and input voltage is 1 volt. ID is 0.17 milliampere. And varying the voltage 1.5 volt, input voltage is 1.5, then VD is 0.480, ID is 0.32 milliampere. Varying 2 volt, input voltage is 2 volt, input voltage 2 volt, corresponding the value VD is 0.496 and ID is 0.47 milliamp. Then 3 volt, then input voltage is 3 volt, VD is 0.519 and ID is 0.778 milliamp. Again 4 volt, input voltage 4 Input voltage is 4, corresponding the reading VD is 0.535, ID is 1.09 milliamp. Then 5 volt, in 5 volt input voltage is 5, VD is 0.546 and ID is 1.41. Then 6 volt input voltage is 6 and VD is 0.556 and ID is 1.71. Then 7 volt input voltage is 7 and VD is 0.563, ID is 2.02. Then 8 volt then 8 volt input voltage is 8, VD is 0.571 and ID is 2.36 milliamps. Then 9 volt VD is 0.577 and ID is 2.67 milliamp. Then 10 volt VD is 0.582, ID is 2.97 milliamp. Then 11 volt VD is 0.587, ID is 3.29 milliamp. Then 15 volt VD is 0.603 and ID is 4.59 milliamp. Now the reverse bias connection is reverse this direction of this PN junction diode or change the supply. And changing this supply, positive connected is negative and negative terminal connected through positive. So diode positive terminal connected negative with negative and negative terminal connected with positive. This is our reverse bias connection. Now input voltage 0, then VDR 0 and IDR 0. Now input voltage 1, input voltage varied 1 volt, input voltage 1, VDR 0.994 and ID is 0. Now input voltage 2 volt, input voltage 2 and VDR 2 volt, ID 0.2 microampere, 0.2 microampere. Now input voltage vary 3 volt, input voltage 3, VDR 3 volt and IDR 0.3 microampere. Now input voltage 4 volt, input voltage 4 volt, VDR 4 volt, and IDR 0.4 microampere. Now input voltage vary 5 volt, input voltage is 5 volt, VDR is 5 and IDR is 0.5 microampere. Now input voltage 6 volt, now input voltage varying 6 volt, input voltage 6 volt, VDR 6 volt and current 0.7 microampere. Now varying input voltage 7 volt, input voltage 7 volt, VDR 7 volt and current 0.8 microampere. Now input voltage 8 volt, VDR 8 volt, current 0.9 microampere. Now varying input voltage 9 volt, input voltage 9 volt, VDR 9 volt, current 1.1 microampere. Now input voltage 10 volt, input voltage 10 volt, VDR 10 volt, input voltage 10 volt, VDR 10 volt, current 1.2 microampere. Now input voltage 11, now input voltage 11, VDR 11, IDR 1.3 microampere. Now input voltage 12, now input voltage 12 volt, VDR 12, input voltage 12 volt, VDR 12 volt or IDR 1.4 microampere. Now input voltage 13 volt, input voltage 13, VDR 13 IDR 1.5 microampere. Now input voltage 14, input voltage 14, input voltage 14, VDR 14, IDR 1.7. Now input voltage 15, input voltage 15, VDR 15, IDR 1.8. Now input voltage 18, VDR 18, input voltage 18, VDR 18, 2.2 microampere. 20, input voltage 20, VDR 20, input voltage 20, VDR 20, VDR 20, ID 2.4 microampere. Now input voltage varying 25 volt, 25 volt, VDR 25, IDR 3.1 microampere. Now input voltage 31, VDR 31, IDR 3.9 microampere.